Right, so an anti-Semitic attack targets a synagogue in Manchester. It's serious, hateful, and rightly condemned. But the response from Labour now isn't expanded anti-racism or cross-community protection. It's a crackdown on students protesting Israel's war on Gaza. The government rolled out 600 anti-Semitism training sessions across UK universities are not going to be delivered by neutral educators, but by the Union of Jewish Students instead, a Zionist group formerly affiliated with the World Zionist Organization, which oversees illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. For this rancid Starmer regime, therefore, criticism of Israel now falls under the jurisdiction of hate. A legitimately anti-Semitic attack is being weaponized to promote pro-Israel narratives in our universities. The BBC is playing its part in this, of course, as well, and Laura Koonsberg's stenography show This Weekend that's just gone. Dissent is reframed as extremism, and while actual Jewish safety is used as political cover, what's really being policed is speech and protest and the right to stand with Palestine. This isn't protection, it's ideological discipline, and Labour want to shovel it into our classrooms. Right, so Keir Starmer's Labour Party has positioned itself as the responsible alternative to the chaos of previous leadership. But one of its clearest message, unfortunately, has been repeated through press releases and televised interviews and internal policy documents ad nauseum, is that anti-Semitism is an issue that must be confronted head-on. But their read on anti-Semitism, of course. In and of itself, it's not a line many of us would disagree with. This line is presented as a moral imperative, after all, and none of us are on the side of real anti-Semitism, I would hope. But Labour under Starmer no longer simply opposes anti-Semitism. It uses the fight against it to signal moral clarity and political responsibility, and to distance itself, of course, from the Jeremy Corbyn era, still very much smeared as anti-Semitic by the worst dross that passes for mainstream media and journalism in the UK these days. Now, this might appear on the surface to be a natural course correction, but this is Starmer we're talking about, so come on, people. What has now emerged is a policy framework in which real anti-Semitic violence, namely examples such as the recent Manchester synagogue attack, are being mobilised as the pretext for a broader ideological project. A project not aimed at confronting racism at all, but at consolidating pro-Israel orthodoxy within British universities. And the mechanism for this campaign is the government's partnership with the Union of Jewish Students, a Zionist organisation which links illegal settlement infrastructure in the West Bank, tasked now with delivering 600 anti-Semitism training sessions in higher education. So what is being constructed through this programme is not a safeguarding system, it's an enforcement architecture. And its political function should be very clear: to recast opposition to Israeli state violence as racial hate as well, to bring university policy into alignment with Israeli diplomatic strategy too, and to shut down student-led resistance to occupation and apartheid, because that will never do. We're all familiar with the recent attack on that synagogue in Manchester. It was a criminal act motivated by hate. This was genuine, legitimate anti-Semitism, the real thing. Local and national politicians condemned the attack. Media outlets ran coverage emphasising the broader context of rising anti-Semitism across the UK. Jewish organisations called for increased protection and institutional support. These responses, in large part, were both necessary and appropriate, given what had happened. Should be no doubt of that. However, the policy direction being taken in response to this incident, because it's very hard to say it's not in response to this incident given how recent it has been, is diverging from that cause. Instead of expanding anti-racist protections across the board for all forms of racism, the Labour Party, through Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson, and as detailed when she appeared on Laura Koonsberg's Sunday morning's politics show This Weekend Gone, used that attack as a pretext to launch a campaign aimed at curbing anti-Semitism in universities. During that televised interview, Phillipson announced that the government would be funding 600 anti-Semitism training sessions across British higher education institutions, and that the contract to deliver this programme was being given to the Union of Jewish Students. The language used to justify this rollout was immediately revealing. Phillipson, at one point that was raised during that interview, cited what was being described as a rising tide of anti-Semitism on campuses, and an example she pointed to back this up were the lyrics of British punk band Bob Vylan, who of course now infamously chanted "Death to the IDF" on stage, and this was pointed to as evidence of this trend. But this lyric, whatever your personal view of the tone of that, refers to the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, a state military organisation, one the Green Party under Zach Polanski have said they would prescribe as a terror organisation. It does not target Jews, therefore, it targets the Israeli military. Under any objective definition of anti-Semitism, it does not qualify. This framing reveals the structural intention of the programme, though. The distinction between Jews as a people, Judaism as a religion, and Israel as a state is being erased by design. The policy is not concerned with racial hate, it is concerned with political speech. The reclassification of anti-military or anti-colonial slogans as anti-Semitic is a clear indication that the policy's purpose is to collapse criticism of Zionism into an accusation of racism. To keep on conflating the two, to keep on endangering Jewish people as a result of that, arguably a narrative that could have led to the attack on that synagogue in Manchester. And the conflation is, in my mind, racist as well as dangerous. On the same broadcast, Laura Kuenssberg repeated an allegation from the advocacy group Stand With Us, claiming that a group of anti-Israel students at an unnamed university, which is awfully convenient given we cannot check the story as a result, had compiled a list of Jewish students to mark and harass them. No institution was named, no evidence was provided, no legal complaint filed, or not one that we can look up because she won't name the university in question. Yet the claim was broadcast on national television regardless. The source, Stand With Us, is a known pro-Israel organisation with documented ties to Israeli government departments and a history of disinformation and aggressive campaigning on campuses in the UK and the US. So the effect of airing that claim in a segment focused on Labour's policy rollout was to produce a narrative climate in which pro-Palestinian student activism was indistinguishable from hate speech, and in which government-led ideological control could be legitimised as a public safety measure. The organisation chosen to deliver the government's training sessions is not a neutral body either. The Union of Jewish Students, by its own definition, is a Zionist organisation. Its constitution affirms support for Israel as a Jewish and democratic state and endorses the principle of Jewish self-determination in Israel. The UJS runs programmes promoting engagement with Israeli officials and supports policies that reject boycott, divestment and sanctions. Its education materials and political advocacy consistently defend Israeli state interests. The UJS also maintains a formal relationship with the World Zionist Organization, the WZO, through its settlement division, which operates as a key facilitator of Israel's illegal colonization of the West Bank. The WZO operates as a semi-official arm of the Israeli state, channeling public funds and logistical support to settlement construction, all while avoiding legal accountability through its designation as a private body. The settlements built with WZO support are widely recognized as violations of international law. In affiliating with WZO and aligning itself with Israeli state policy, the UJS functions not simply as a student welfare group, but as a participant in a global political program. The delivery of anti-Semitism training by an organisation with this profile introduces a conflict of interest so severe that it undermines any semblance of the programme's credibility. This is not the deployment of a neutral anti-racism framework, it's the imposition of a political litmus test, that test being how far can Starmer push this. At the centre of Labour's framework is the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, of course. This working definition, now widely used across public institutions, includes 11 examples of anti-Semitism, 7 of which refer directly to the State of Israel. These examples include statements such as claiming that the existence of a State of Israel is a racist endeavour and applying double standards by requiring of it a behaviour not expected of any other democratic nation. This formulation allows for the classification of statements opposing apartheid, occupation and ethno-nationalism as expressions of racial hatred. It provides ideological cover for treating Palestinian narratives as threats. It also permits institutions to classify political slogans, calls for boycott or academic research critical of Israel as hate speech. The use of the IHRA definition in university policy has been widely condemned by academics and human rights lawyers, including the definition's own lead drafter, who has stated publicly that it is being misused to suppress academic and political freedom. In practice, students have been referred to disciplinary panels or subjected to institutional investigations for holding banners, for chanting slogans or distributing literature that falls under the IHRA's politicised criteria. Phrases such as "from the river to the sea" are routinely framed as incitement despite their consistent use in Palestinian civil society and their basis in political geography. In parallel, Jewish students who reject Zionism have been reported being marginalised or misrepresented by campus Jewish organisations. UJS does not formally represent anti-Zionist Jewish groups. In several reported cases, Jewish students opposing Israeli policy were excluded from public dialogues, accused of betrayal, or silenced by mainstream Jewish student bodies. The resulting effect is that anti-Zionist Jews are erased from the public narrative because they're inconvenient, reinforcing the illusion that Jewish identity and support for Israel are inseparable. Labour's programme has received minimal scrutiny so far in the press, though. The BBC in particular has played a central role in validating the political framework of this policy by airing unverified claims from lobby groups, platforming pro-Israel politicians without challenge, and consistently excluding Palestinian perspectives, the BBC has helped produce a consensus narrative in which pro-Palestinian protest is framed as extremism. The latest broadcast of Koonsberg's show, which featured Bridget Phillipson and Preeti Patel, exemplifies this pattern. Koonsberg did not mention Patel's resignation over secret meetings with Israeli officials, nor was there any effort to interrogate the interests or credibility of Stand With Us. No Palestinian guests or anti-Zionist Jewish representatives were invited to participate in the discussion. Where's the balance this time then, BBC? The effect of this silence is structural. It removes dissent from sight and frames the debate in terms set by the state and its allies. This is not an editorial oversight. This is an example of narrative enforcement in which a public broadcaster advances state-aligned messaging under the guise of balanced reporting. The outcome is a media climate that justifies policy repression, marginalises resistance, and isolates those who speak against dominant narratives. The implementation of Labour's university anti-Semitism policy will have immediate consequences for students. Reports from student organisers and rights monitors over past incidents indicate that pro-Palestinian activism has already been subjected to enhanced scrutiny, to institutional penalties and informal pressure. Students involved in Gaza Solidarity encampments have faced referrals to the Prevent programme. Others have been warned against using certain slogans, even when those slogans are in use by human rights organisations and are historically grounded. Campus groups advocating for Palestinian rights have had events cancelled, funding withdrawn, or meeting spaces revoked following complaints from external organisations. Muslim students in particular report being subjected to disproportionate monitoring. The result is a chilling effect across political life on campus. Students censor themselves. Events are quietly dropped. Conversations get redirected. Political education gets completely undermined. These developments take place within a broader context of state securitisation. By embedding Zionist-aligned training and IHRA-defined speech limits into university policy, Labour is operationalising a form of soft censorship. The institutions of education are being enlisted into an ideological campaign that not only distorts the nature of anti-Semitism, but uses the fight against racism as a mechanism for political control. And the risk is not only to students. Academics researching Israel and Palestine, teaching critical human rights law, or hosting public lectures on decolonial theory have also faced administrative pressure and reputational attacks. This degrades the principle of academic freedom and undermines the role of the university as a site of open inquiry. Inquiring minds even, need no longer apply. Labour's current approach to anti-Semitism in universities cannot be understood as a good faith effort to protect Jewish students. It won't do that. It's a deliberate political strategy built on redefining anti-Semitism to encompass opposition to Zionism, outsourcing training to organisations with clear ideological interests, and marginalising voices that challenge state narratives. The outcome is the reclassification of political protest as hate, the erasure of Palestinian perspectives from campus life, and the weaponisation of anti-Semitism in the service of a foreign policy agenda. Jewish students deserve better than this. They deserve protection from real racism. Absolutely they do. They deserve protection from their faith being weaponised against them in the interest of another state as well. Palestinian students deserve the right to organise without being cast as extremists. Academic institutions must remain spaces of plurality, not enforcers of state ideology. What Labour is building is not anti-racism infrastructure, it's a mechanism for indoctrination. Any response to anti-Semitism must be grounded in a commitment to truth, plurality and justice. Anything less is not protection, it's propaganda. But of course, while Starmer and co tried to indoctrinate the university, Starmer himself might be heading for a day in the dock over his pro-Israel proclivities, namely over the abandonment of British civilians on board vessels that were part of the global Sumud flotilla to Israel's tender mercies. British citizens being kidnapped in international waters by a foreign state. Starmer didn't say boo to a goose over it, did he? He just let it happen. To get all the details of the bind he's rightly put himself in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and helping to support the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated, holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers folks.